is why I thank the Lord for saving me when I was weak. So I will sing. This is why I thank the Lord for everything, and this is why I thank the Lord. All of my affection, everything I have to give, the sum of my attention is measured in the praise I lift. So this is how I thank the Lord for saving me when I was weak. So I will sing. This is how I thank the Lord for everything. This is how I thank the Lord. And this is how I thank the Lord for loving me and keeping me. So I will sing. This is how I thank the Lord for everything. This is how I thank the Lord. I will sing, I will sing, I will lift my praises to you. I will sing, I will sing, I will lift my praises to you. I will sing, I will sing, I will lift my praises to you. I will sing, I will sing, 'cause this is how I praise the Lord. This is how I thank the Lord for saving me when I was weak. So I will sing. This is how I thank the Lord. 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 This is how I thank the Lord.
The bright, the glimmer that breaks the constant night. And you are the brilliance and the dream, the evidence of things unseen. 'Cause even the darkest days are temporary. You are the everlasting. Come on, sing it out with us. And all of the time and space could not contain you. You are the everlasting. Here we go, come on. You are the glory that stays, and you never dim, you never fade. And you are the power and the truth, and nothing can stop you. Nothing can stop you. Come on.
the everlasting.
Come on, let's pick it up a notch. Come on, sing it out. The end in the beginning, new reality. Outside my understanding, still within my reach. As far as I can see you, you're closer still to me. You are the everlasting light. Come on, come on. The end in the beginning, the new reality. Outside my understanding, still within my reach. As far as I can see you, closer still to me. You are the everlasting light.
Darkest days are temporary. You are the everlasting light.
All of the time,
Time and space
it cannot
contain you. You are the everlasting light.
come on, even the darkest days.
Even the darkest days are
Temporary, you are the everlasting light. And all of the time,
time and
all of the
space
time,
not
it cannot contain
You are
you.
the everlasting light.
You are the everlasting light. Come on, sing it like you mean it. All of the time and space not contain. You are the everlasting. Come on, let's sing it one more time. Even the darkest days are temporary. You are the everlasting light. And all of the time, all of the time and space, you are the everlasting light. Come on!
You are constant in the way that you forgive me. Steady as the moon that shifts the tide. Consistent in the way that you believe in me. And true and now you choose me every time. Till the end, I will stand with you till the end. Devoted to you till the end. I will sing to you till the end. You are constant in the way that you amaze me. Steady as the moon that brings the night. You are consistent in the way that you're redeeming me. True in how my past will change your mind. Till the end, I will stand with you till the end. Devoted to you till the end. I will sing to you till the end.
you will hear my voice, my imperfect melody. When my bones are dust and my hands can't raise, you will hear my voice.
Come on, we lift that up till all time runs out.
Till all time
And my breath wears thin.
and my breath
You will hear my voice.
you will hear.
Come on, tonight we sing from now until eternity. We praise Jesus, the one who saved us. Until our breath is gone, until our bones are dust, we will sing. Come on, lift it up. Till all time runs out and my breath wears thin. You will hear my voice. When my bones are dust and my hands can't raise, you will hear my voice, and my love will last till the end. I will stand with you till the end, devoted to you till the end. I will sing to you till the end. Oh, till the end. You can count on me till the end, faithfully till the end. I will sing to you till the end, till the end, till the end. You hear my
Come on, sing this out with me, Mosaic. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together. God of my future,
write my story.
you hold it all together. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together. Oh, you hold it all together. Hold it all together. Hold it all together. Come on, sing God of my present. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story. You hold it all together. God of my present, God of my future, you write my story, you hold it all together.
Hey Mosaic, my name is Chad and I serve on the Welcome team. And I want to say wherever you are in the world, welcome to Mosaic Online. I have one quick announcement. MSC, our worship band, the sound of our tribe here at Mosaic, has just released their second single, Unexpected Roads. And also you can pre-order the new album wherever you find music. I'd like to transition into a time of giving. Here at Mosaic, we believe that giving is a matter of the heart and that we do that together as a community. And I'm reminded of my fiance, who's like one of the most generous people that I know. Her acts of generosity, it moves people. And it moves people closer to Jesus, moves people closer to life change. And I'm inspired by her giving. And I remember when I first made that decision, I'm gonna be generous with my life. And in Acts 20:35, it says it's better to give than to receive. And I really believe that's true. So let's give together, whether that's online or on the app or any of the ways on the screen. Okay, Mosaic, let's lean in and let's get ready or prepare our hearts and minds to hear what Pastor Erwin has to say.
So in a previous episode, I introduced to you this concept about the stories we tell ourselves. If you were not here, you're sort of going to pick up missing an episode. But I'm going to give you a little recap because that's what Netflix taught us. The recap can help you catch up on an entire season lost. We talked about how all of us as human beings tell ourselves stories that give context to our lives. But it's more than that. It's that every singular human emotion that you will ever experience, that you will ever hold on to, that will ever hold you, needs a story to exist. And so when you feel pain or fear, when you feel guilt or shame, when you feel bitterness or anger, those emotions need a story to exist. By the way, one of the best ways you can understand this is that we have nightmares. Have you ever thought about how odd it is that we have nightmares, that we actually sleep and a story is created in our unconscious, and that our subconscious wraps us inside of a story that can actually torment us or terrify us? And the reason that is because there are emotions that you're grappling with, emotions that you're struggling with, emotions that you're working through, and those emotions simply cannot exist in you in a vacuum, so a story is created, and we call it a nightmare. And so you wake up. Have you ever been awakened by a nightmare and you could still remember the nightmare? Or you couldn't quite remember the nightmare, but you could remember the emotions you felt in the nightmare? How is it that the human brain knows to create a story, to put you in the middle of that story, and then to haunt you in that story? On the flip side, we have dreams. Have you ever had a dream so good you did not want to wake up? A dream that was sort of still lingering when you woke up and you wanted to go back to sleep? And you go, oh, the story I'm in right now is better than the story I'm about to go into. So I don't want to wake up. I don't want to sleep through my dreams. I want to live in my dreams. It's because even positive emotions need a story to exist. You're inherently a storyteller, but you may not be telling other people the primary stories that are affecting you. Maybe the stories that you're telling yourself. And so we unwrap certain stories, the stories we tell ourselves that actually trap us and not only inform us, but form us. And that how those stories can actually limit the development of who you are as a human being. It can actually hold you captive and never allow you to become the person you long to be. It's almost as if the story you're in is the one that you do not want to be, and the story that you imagine is a story you can't seem to get to. And so after we began this first episode of the stories we tell ourselves, almost immediately after I stepped off the platform, funny things started happening. People started talking to each other about the story they're in. Oh, you're this, or you're this, or you're this. No one was saying, oh, I'm this. It's amazing how the moment we hear about how stories shape us, we start identifying the stories in other people, but we still seem to be completely unaware of the story that's shaping us. But then almost the moment I walked off the platform, Aaron came up to me and said, Dad, you You told us the negative stories we're in, but you didn't tell us how to get out. That's up to you. So that's why we're coming back. We're going to pick up now episode 2. Because there is a legend that's waiting for you. But it's a legend you have to choose no matter what story you're in right now. And so I want to talk about flipping the script, about the rewrites. And over the years, I have actually had the opportunity to work on rewrites for incredible films. I worked behind the scenes on some of the stories from Scorsese to Malick. And what's always fascinated me is when you get a script and they want you to fix an event in the script, but the problem is the character. Like, can you work on this scene? Going, I could, but if the scene actually became good, it wouldn't fit. Because the movie is bad. Because the story is bad. And the reality is that the texture of the story determines the interpretation of every experience. It's not the other way around. The experiences do not define the character. The character defines the experiences. And that's why the story you're in matters so much, because you may actually think that you're absorbing all the information that's available, all the experiences that are available, all the reality that's out there, but your story has filtered out what you desperately need to see, to step into, to engage, so that you can have a new story. So we began with the victim, by the way. The victim was the first character inside of the larger narrative of us. The victim we found from the very beginning of the human story with Adam and Eve, with man and woman. That moment in the garden when they severed their relationship with God, and God comes back and says, what did you do? Because they ate from the fruit that they were not supposed to eat from. And of course, what we find is the man immediately blaming the woman. Because the pattern when you're the victim is blame. There's always someone to blame for your life. So Adam blames the woman and God. And the woman, not given a lot of options, blamed the snake. But you always find someone to blame. Now, it's kind of amazing to me. There are only 2 people in the world, and they couldn't take responsibility. I have a feeling if there had only been Adam, he still would not have taken responsibility. He said, God, the woman you gave me. So this all begins with you, God. You're to blame. And one of the curious things about us is it doesn't matter how many people are in our story, we'll always find someone else to blame when we're the victim. And so if you happen to have people available, you'll blame the people in your life. It's your fault that I'm going through this. And if you don't have people to blame, you'll blame some circumstance. It's because of these things that I'm like this. And if you aren't satisfied with blaming people and blaming circumstances, you'll blame God. That's why there's so many people who are angry with God, because you need God to blame. In fact, some of you need to believe in God because you need someone to blame. But I always find it's interesting that that's not even the limitation of our need to blame when we're victims. I know people who do not believe in God and still blame God. Pick one. Either God does not exist or he's not responsible. But you cannot hold God responsible if he does not exist. We need God just so that we have someone to blame for who we are, where we are, and what we've done and who we've become. Is your pattern in life that you blame, and your internal script is, you did this to me. You being whatever else is out there. You humanity. You, the universe. You, God. You, the environment. You, my parents. Some of you have spent your entire life blaming someone for who you are now. But when will you flip the script and finally take responsibility for your life? There's this interesting passage because, you see, out of this narrative, out of this story, you can elevate to your legend. So every one of us have a legend we're supposed to step into, but you don't stumble into it. You don't crawl into your legend. You don't descend into your legend. You have to rise up to your legend. And if you are right now the victim, you can become the healer. Listen to these words of 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 7. Paul writes, praise be to to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ. If we are distressed, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which produces in you patient endurance of the same suffering we suffer. And our hope for you is firm, because we know that just as you share in our sufferings, so also you will share in our comfort. So I want you to realize that if you're looking for an out from suffering, God is not the out. See, I think a lot of times people go, okay, I'm open to God if God will show me the loophole out of suffering in this life. But there is no loophole out. See, one thing that is common to all of us is that all of us have wounds. All of us have pain. All of us have suffering. And the reality is that the victim thinks that they're the only person who's been through this. But your pain is not what makes you unique. Your pain makes you common because we all have pain. And so here, he doesn't say, here's the way Jesus gets you out of suffering. He's saying, this is what he's going to do out of your suffering. He's going to move you from the victim and raise you to your legend so you can become the hero. You can become the healer in the story. Now, my wife, Kim, never really tells her story, so I always have to tell it for her. Because I saw this again, how the victim becomes the healer. Some of you may not know that my wife, Kim, was an orphan from the age of 8. And she lived in a foster home from the age of 8 all the way through to when she left for college. And even though she went off to college, she still loved that foster family and made them her family throughout her life. She had 9 brothers and sisters, and they all dispersed to different homes and different circumstances. Some became homeless and drug addicts or pregnant when they were teenagers. And Kim knew that she had to find a different way out. And she started walking herself across a farm where she was working on the tobacco fields from her childhood. Walked into a church. On her own, began searching for God and eventually found him. She knew education was probably her only hope to get out of the poverty that her entire family was trapped in. And so she finished high school and got a scholarship to college and finished with an education degree and winning awards. I met her when she was getting her master's degree. And when my wife Kim began teaching in the 3rd grade, I had this sense that she was investing in 3rd graders because that was about the age where she was abandoned. And she wanted to help those kids in this critical transition in their life. But last night in her house was a culmination of some of her lifelong dreams. She wanted to create a way for foster kids who were transitioning out of the system to not simply struggle through the transition, but to find transformation. And so they created the Mosaic Educational Institute initiative. And through MEI, they invited all these mentors, some of the most successful people we have at Mosaic, invited them into this initiative and said, would you come and mentor these emerging leaders and help them have a vision for a bigger life and give of your hard-earned money and invest in them so they can have a future. And so last night, the first dozen students came through. The first dozen emerging leaders were in our home. And when I watched Kim and those mentors working with them, and some from Christian backgrounds, some from irreligious backgrounds, some from Muslim backgrounds, but all of them discovering that even though their story may have began as victims, they don't have to stay victims, they can become healers. That all of them have a future and a hope. But you have to rise up to your legend. And I think one of the greatest and most critical narratives I hear over and over again is, you don't know what happened to me. You don't understand my pain. If you'd been through what I've been through, you'd be just as messed up as I am right now. And I want you to understand something that may be very painful for you to grapple with. There's someone who has suffered more than you. someone who has deeper wounds than you, someone who has darker, more painful memories than you, and they chose to not allow that to be their story. They decide, I am not the victim, I am the healer, I will rise up to my legend. But there are others of you, you're not the victim, you're the martyr. This is another story we tell ourselves. It's not the story of, why did this happen to me? Why did you do this to me? The martyr's a little different. The martyr doesn't have a pattern of always blaming. They have a pattern of always being overwhelmed because they're just taking on so much. Because no one cares as much as them. No one does as much as them. No one is as noble as them. And they never enjoy life because life is such a burden. And their script is, I'm the only one. And we saw in the life of Elijah how even after this epic moment where God answers his prayers and sends fire down from heaven, he then runs for his life because he's afraid of a woman named Jezebel. He goes and hides in a cave, and then he has a conversation with God, and he tells God, I'm the only one. No one else is as courageous as me. No one else has been as noble as me. No one else has been as honorable as me. No one else cares as much as me. God, why would you do this to me? Why would you leave me here alone? I'm the only one. And God says, well, you're the only one plus 7,000 others that you don't seem to be able to recognize. See, the martyr convinces themselves that they're the only one who cares. They're the only one who's making a difference. They're the only one who really carries the burden of life and humanity. And if you believe in God, it just makes you worse. Because you have Jesus dying on the cross, and so you think every day you're dying on your cross. You're just suffering for everyone else. And we've been brought into this, I think, really, really destructive psychological, theological framework of God does not want you to enjoy life. God wants you to suffer through life so you can be holy. I remember when Kim and I were getting our master's degree, we had a friend, and he seemed to me to be really holy. I was kind of new to the whole faith thing, so I wasn't sure what that looked like, but I thought he looked holy. And he would always talk like he was holy, and he would always say this one thing, oh, God is really breaking me. And at first I was really impressed. Wow, I need God to break me, and they would just say, oh, God's really breaking me. Oh, God's really breaking me. And then I started feeling bad. I started feeling badly because I was having fun. I was really enjoying life, and I started feeling really guilty for enjoying life while God was really breaking him. I was just having a great time, and I started thinking to myself, wow, I am so unholy. Because you cannot be holy and be this happy. You can't be holy and enjoy life this fully. You can't be holy and actually be filled with pleasure and joy and beauty and wonder. And so finally, one day he said, oh, God's really breaking me. I said, what do you keep doing to tick God off? Because if he's breaking you every day, what are you doing to create that kind of reaction? See, I think a lot of us have this idea of God, that God is the eternal killjoy. And that what God came to do is to make sure that nothing in this life is enjoyable. Because, by the way, if you're enjoying your life, that means you're unholy. Because after all, God and joy are counter opposites, right? God, happiness. God, pleasure. God, joy. God, life. No wonder when people use the phrase, Jesus will change your life, a lot of people are running. Because they look at people who claim Jesus. They look at people who claim God. They look at people who claim to be people of faith, and they look at you and you're miserable. Jesus will change my life to be like you? I'll tap out. I'll pick the Norse gods. I'd rather trust Thor. Maybe, he seems like he knows how to enjoy life better than Jesus. I want you to realize that God did not die on the cross so that you could be a martyr. That God actually created you to enjoy life. Take a deep breath and realize That every breath you take is a promise from God that there's something beautiful waiting to be experienced. That you have to rise up to your legend. If you're the martyr, and I know some of you are, and you've convinced yourself this is what makes you spiritual, this is what makes you special, you're just always suffering. Life is always hard. If you're always overwhelmed, if you're always stressed out, that's not God. See, that's you. You see, if you don't have enough energy to wake up in the morning and be grateful to be alive, that's not God, that's you. If you don't have time to laugh, to love, if you don't have time to dance and to sing, that's not God. That's you. See, God is the God who teaches you how to dance in the rain. God is the God who teaches you to see beauty and wonder all around you. God is the God who wants to fill you with all joy and with all hope. Life is a celebration. I always thought it was odd when people would come even to Mosaic from other religious experiences and go, I don't know. I don't know if it's right. You know, because people like sing loud, clap, laugh, especially when I'm funny. Is that sacred? Is that allowed? Is that okay? Because most of us, if we had a sacred experience, you know what sacred is, right? You walk in, it's quiet. You walk in, no one talks. You walk in, no one's happy. Walk in and everyone has to experience something somber and morose because we know that's where God is. You don't realize God is not at the cemetery. God is at the party. But the way you rise up to your legend of moving out of being the martyr is you realize that you're the pioneer. Well, I had another word besides pioneer because it fits better, but I didn't want to use a big word. You're the progenitor. You see, the martyr says to himself, I'm the only one, but the pioneer, I'm the first one of many. I'm just the first one at the party. I'm the first one in the future. I'm the first one that stepped into this new reality, and God wants to use me as a signpost so that everyone knows there is freedom here. I was looking back at the life of Abram before he was Abraham, while he was Abram. I mean, if you're going to have a name change, don't just add a syllable, but you can be more creative. In fact, I've just been having this thought more and more because when I'm 65, I think I'm going to change my name back to my Latin name because I've had an Irish name all my life, even though I'm not Irish. And I just thought, before I die, I'm going to go back to being Spanish. And I just think that Cardona y Carvajal sounds cool. And but God changes names because he changes your story. And he calls out Abram and he says to him, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you a great nation and I will bless you. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you will be cursed, and all the peoples of the earth will be a blessing through you. And we listen to this promise from God to Abram. We only hear all the blessing part, but we don't actually hear the part where he could have been the martyr. See, God said to him, I want you to leave everything you know. I want you to leave your hometown. I want you to leave your family. I want you to leave your friends. I want you to leave everything you've built. I want you to leave everything you've ever put your hands to, and I want you to give it all up and follow me into an uncertain unknown. And if you'll follow me, then I'm going to do something so extraordinary, it's going to take multiple generations for it to happen, so you won't really fully experience it. It would have been so easy for Abram to go, oh, so you want me to live the life of a martyr so that my children and my grandchildren can experience the full benefit of your vision for their future. But what about me, God? It would have been so easy for Abraham to say, God, I'm the only one. And God said, no, you're not the only one. You're just the first one. And someone has to go first so that everyone else knows where the future is going, where the freedom is waiting for them. And I can tell you, there have been times in my life where I know that God has called me to be first. And it's a very lonely place. Because when you're first, you are there alone. And a lot of times when you're first and you're there alone, everyone that knows you is angry that you're there. Because now you're giving a new possibility of a different future. See, the moment Abram follows God into a new world, that new world now exists. The moment Abram follows God to the new possibility now exists. And what the danger is when you stay a martyr is that you think your suffering is what makes you unique, but it just makes you the same. It makes you common. What gives you your legend? You go, no, I'm not a martyr for martyr's sake. I'm a progenitor. I'm a pioneer. I'm breaking new ground. I'm just the first of many to come. And but not only do you have the victim and the martyr, but we also saw that we have the innocent. Now, the innocent's tricky. Because when you listen to someone's story, when they tell the story of them, it's easy to identify the victim because the victim immediately blames other people. And it's kind of easy to identify the martyr because they think they're the only one who cares. They're the only one who's suffering. They're the only one who's making it happen. But when you get to the innocent, it's a little tricky because you see the pattern of the person who's innocent is abdication. They just never take responsibility for anything. So you can never pinpoint what they're doing wrong. You just can't ever identify what they're doing right. It's Pilate when he washes his hands when Jesus is standing in front of him. He could have proclaimed Jesus innocent and Jesus would have been set free. He could have taken responsibility for the power that was entrusted to him in that moment, but he abdicated his power. It was within his power to do so, and he missed his moment. Can you imagine how God would have written the history of Pilate? If Pilate would have stepped into his moment and said, this man is innocent, and before you kill him, you're going to have to kill me. That would have been a different story about Pilate. But instead he goes, I'm just going to wash my hands of this as if it washed his soul. And there's some of you here, you just don't do anything bad. You just don't do anything good. You don't make wrong choices. You just don't make right choices. You just sort of exist. You're sort of a universal anomaly. You're sort of a human black hole. The light disappears when it gets to you. See, what is it that gets you up in the morning where you have to make a difference? And it's tricky because there's so many things to care about that there's almost too many things to care about, right? Have you ever felt like you just have compassion overload? I can't care about everything. Now you care about Ukraine. You did not even know Ukraine existed. Right? It's like people who from Ukraine just used to say they're from Russia because we knew where Russia was. And now you got to care about Ukraine. And then you hear, well, no, but there's other things going on in the Middle East. Okay, you got to care about Yemen. And you hear, oh, well, there's something else going on in Haiti. You got to care about Haiti. And we have so much information now that it's so easy to not care about anything because you're supposed to care about everything. And should you help young girls find freedom out of the sex trade? Should you try to end homelessness in LA? Should you build houses so that people at homes have homes? What should you do? And the great danger is because there's so many things you should care about that you don't care about anything. You just shut down internally. And one of the great dangers sometimes being a part of a community where people are doing good is that you pretend you're doing good because other people are doing good. So you're embracing the vicarious goodness of other people and pretending it is you. But if it was just you, what is the good you're doing? How do you break out of the story of being the innocent? It's not my problem. It's not my issue. It's not my agenda. Well, you need to rise up and become an activist. You need to pick something that you give your life to, that you're going to make a difference. You're going to get up in the morning and go, I'm going to do a little bit of good in the world. And you go, hey, but how do I know which one? How many of you ever feel paralyzed because you don't know, what am I supposed to do? Which good am I supposed to do? Here's the weird thing about it. Most people think that God's okay with them as long as they don't do any good. But we think somehow God's going to get mad if we do the wrong good. I mean, is it really a wrong good? Like, do you really need like career counseling about what good you should do? I mean, how about if you, let's say, hypothetically, do the wrong good? Like, God created you to do this good, but you didn't know. So you did this good. You think that's going to be good? What good was that? See, it's better to do the wrong good than to do no good at all. In fact, that's the only thing that isn't good at all. And by the way, maybe you get involved in someone else's good. You ever just been pulled into someone else's fire? Someone else's passion, someone else's activism, and so you joined in. And then when she didn't want to date you, you realized, I'm not passionate about that, and you want to move on to something else. It's okay to be a part of a good that isn't your long-term good because you're still doing good. And you'll never see the good God wants you to do until you just do some good. So as long as you're abdicating, as long as you're washing your hands, as long as you're choosing to do nothing, you will never see the good you could do in the world. But you need to rise up to the legend and say, I'm going to do some good in the world. And as I do this good, I'm going to trust that God's going to clarify for me the more specific good that I'm supposed to do. And by the way, you might experience the domino effect. Just by doing good, you will actually motivate the good in other people. And you will start doing more and more good simply because of the influence you have in other people's lives. Because when you're doing good, more good gets done, even the good you didn't get done. So right now, we live in a culture where if you don't post about every issue, you're the bad guy. But it's a mirage. It's all smoke. Just because you post about something doesn't mean you've done anything. So your life may actually be an Instagram abdication. If I can post about these things, I never have to do anything about it. So if you don't have an Instagram, if you don't have social media, what's the good you're doing? What does your life post? By your actions. See, the script of the innocent, it's not my problem, but the activist says, this is my calling. This is my destiny. This is my moment. Pilate had his moment, and he washed his hands of it. What is it that God's putting in front of you right now? That if you just took hold of it, you would do so much good. And maybe it's not the good you're supposed to do next year. It's just the good you're supposed to do right now in your life. By the way, the person that really inspired me in this was a guy named Caleb. He lived back with Moses and Joshua. And a part of it is because it would be so easy to get to a certain stage in your life and go, I just don't have time to do good, or it's past my doing good stage in life. And in Joshua 14, just want you to listen to this narrative. This is beginning of verse 6. Caleb is now 85 years old, so, I think he'd be allowed to retire. It says, now the people of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God at Kadesh Barnea, about you and me. I was 40 years old. He said, I was a young man back then. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me to Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. I brought him back a report according to my convictions, but my fellow Israelites, all the cowards who went with me, who went up with me, made the hearts of the people melt in fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day, Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, He has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. In other words, while they've been wandering around, I've been waiting for my moment. So here I am today, 85 years old. I'm feeling so young right now. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there and their cities were large and fortified, but the Lord helping me, I will drive them out just as he said. Then Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. So Hebron has belonged to Caleb and the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. See, what's happening here is that Joshua was going to give Caleb it out. He said, man, you're 85. We've wandered around for decade after decade after decade. You've got to be tired. I'm just going to let you settle down, settle in, and not take any more responsibility for anything that needs to happen. And Caleb goes, what are you talking about? I've been held back by these passive, fearful cowards that are our people. I've been waiting 45 years to step into my destiny, to step into my calling, to step into my moment. You cannot take that from me. So at 85, Caleb demands the right to finally act on his calling. And he says, I want the hill country where the giants live. That's my inheritance. And I'm going after it. And I love Joshua going, all right, it's all yours. There are some people who have more courage in them at 85 than you have at 25. There's some people who have more life in them on the last day of their lives than you have every day of your life. What is it that burns inside of you? What is it that gets you up in the morning? What is the passion, the urgency that brings you determination, that brings you resilience, that says, I have to get this done? You'll never rise up to your legend if you live your life abdicating the opportunities God gives you. Stop blaming God for other people having opportunities that you always had, but you never had the eyes to see or the courage to live. And I'm going to say this. We have a growing culture of resentment towards successful people. We have a growing culture of resentment toward people with wealth. We have a growing culture of resentment with people who accomplish more than us. Because if we can tell a story that they're less than us, that we're more noble than them, it allows us to live a life of abdication. Maybe, just maybe, the difference between us and them is that they had the courage to step into their moment and rise up to their legend. And the fourth narrative, the story we tell ourselves, is the hero. This is a tricky one. In fact, when I first mentioned the hero, everybody kind of leaned in going, oh, finally my story. I'm not the victim. I'm not the martyr. I'm not the innocent. I'm the hero. And frankly, I think a lot of people move to our city here in Los Angeles, and they're the hero of their story. And it's not that there are not moments you are certainly heroic. The problem is that when you're the hero of your story, there's no room for anyone else. There's no oxygen for anyone else to breathe. I mean, does Batman really have a Robin? Not at least for several films. Because Batman, like the hero, they're supposed to be self-contained. They don't really need anyone else in their life. And the challenge here is that this narrative is a pattern of superiority. And the script is really, it's all about me. And by the way, if you're in a relationship with someone who this is their narrative, they're the hero of the story, you're always going to be a moon because they're always going to be the sun. And one of the challenges when you have this narrative is that you can't see it. Because the moment someone says to you, you know, you're a little bit of a narcissist, which means you're completely one, by the way. And you go, Who do you think you are? Talk to me like that. Because no one can speak into your life. And by the way, if no one can speak into your life, this is probably your narrative. And when you're the hero, the tragedy is that you're trying to be something God never created you to be. See, no matter how amazing you are, how talented you are, how gifted you are, you're simply not God. Now, I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had, especially here in LA, when people say to me, well, you know, what we need to accept is our divinity. You know, to realize that, like, we're our own God. And whenever I hear someone say that, I go, well, how's that going for you? Right? Because if you're your own God, then you're answering your own prayers. So you should have like 100% yes. Right? Because if you are your own God and you're talking to yourself, you go, I need this, yes. I want this, yes. Like I'm like checking off yes before I even ask. The way you can know you're not your own God is if when you pray, you don't get a yes. That way you can know you're still inadequate for that job. But how do you rise above the narrative of the hero when that really is moving from it's all about me to I am here to serve? It really is moving from the hero to the servant. And this is more difficult than we think. I mean, a part of the reason Jesus confuses so many historians is that how could you possibly have this much power and also bring this much humility? Like, how could you possibly be God and make the choices you've made? And probably the most profound moment in the life of Jesus that helps us understand this tension is in John 13. In verse 2, it says this: the evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Now Judas was the hero of his own story. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter and he said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize what I am doing now, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you will never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash your feet, you will have no part with me. Then, Lord, Simon Peter said, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Yeah, it's never enough for Peter. Yes, right? When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. And in verse 12, Jesus explains this. See, because the contrast here is that it begins by saying, now Jesus, knowing that all power and authority was given to him. What would you do the moment you knew you had all power and authority? See, what would you do when you had the power of being the hero? Because if you pay attention to every myth, every narrative that we write about the hero isn't the hero because of their powers. The hero is the hero because of their character. In fact, if there's a good story, the villain has as much power, maybe even more power than the hero. What separates the hero from the villain is not who's most powerful, but who is the greatest servant. So the villain serves themselves. They're the hero of their story. But the true hero serves others. And then Jesus says in verse 12, do you understand what I have done for you? And they're probably like, no, we have no idea what you just did or why you did it. He said, you call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. But Jesus is saying, look, this is how you actually live the hero's story. This is how you rise up to your legend. If you bought into the story that you're the hero, which means everyone should be focused on giving you praise. The light should always be on you. Remember, we looked at Herod as the example of the hero, and Kim pointed out to me, do you realize that the word hero is inside of the name Herod? I'm like, that's a little creepy. And how when people called him a god, he just embraced it. And what to me is so fascinating is that Herod wants to be seen as a god, though he's just a man. And Jesus, even though he is God, wants to be seen as a servant. And he says, now, this is why I've done what I've done, so that you can understand this is the story that you were created to be in. Because if I'm your master, no one can be greater than the master. And if I'm the servant, then you must become the servant of all too. And I don't know if we're convinced that this is rising up to our legend. See, I think the hardest thing about this one is that when you rise up to your legend, you want to be the hero, not the servant. And then you have to trust God. God, if I live my life to serve others, will I really live my most heroic life? Your greatest acts of courage are the moments you forget about yourself and you only think about others. If you're thinking about you, it's not courage. The moment you've died to yourself, the moment you're living to do good for others, the moment you're giving your life to make the world better, the moment you think you're not the hero of your story is actually when God goes, there is the heroic story I always want to tell through your life. You got to flip the script. You got to move from being the victim to the healer, from being the martyr to being the pioneer or the progenitor. Move from being the innocent to being the activist. Move from being the hero to being the servant. Because no matter how much it seems your story is holding you captive, there's a story waiting for you yet to be written. There's a story that God began writing about you before you took your first breath. There's a story yet waiting to be written in your life. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Usual Suspects. Not just because there's a character named Peter McManus, but in spite of his infamy, Kevin Spacey plays this extraordinary character named Kaiser Soze. And in the entire film, he's simply telling a story by pulling together pieces to tell the story people wanted to hear. Because what he had learned long before is that if you can tell a story powerful enough, you can hold people captive to it. You may not realize that you've been embracing a story for so long that it has become you. And when you ask Jesus to change you, he's not going to change a moment of you or an emotion in you. He's not just going to heal you from an experience you've had or a trauma you've been through. He's going to rewrite your entire story and take everything you've ever been through, everything you've ever experienced. He's going to take every wound, every scar. He's going to take every moment of tragedy, every tear, every failure. He's going to use that material to tell such an extraordinary story that generations will want to sit by the fire and listen to the legend of the life you lived. Because you were created to live a story that will be told in eternity. Would you just bow your heads with me just for a moment? You might be here and you've never trusted Jesus with your life, but you are so sick of the story you're in. You're just cycling the same story over and over and over again. And it's not the nightmares when you sleep that are haunting you. It's the nightmares when you wake that are haunting you. You so desperately want a new story in your life, a new future, a new hope. And that's why Jesus came. 2,000 years ago, God stepped into human history, took on flesh and blood, walked among us. His name is Jesus. He was crucified on a cross so that through his sacrifice we would have forgiveness and freedom. He rose from the dead so that through his power we would not be powerless. And right now, Jesus invites you to step into the story that you were created to live. right now, if you will choose to cross the line of faith and open your life to Jesus and give him your life, you will begin a new story right now, this moment. And if that's you, if you're ready, I want you to pray this simple prayer. Jesus, I give you my life. That's it. Just tell him, Jesus, I give you my life right now. Jesus, I give you my life. This is where it begins. This is how the first sentence in the new story of you is written. Jesus, I give you my life. I can't wait till he writes the second sentence and the next one and the next one. If you're here in this moment and you're ready to give your life to Jesus, if you just whispered this prayer, Jesus, I give you my life, I want you right now with all the courage you have just to raise your hand so I can see you and pray for you. If you're here and saying, yes, Jesus, I give you my life right now, just hold your hand up high. Beautiful. Anyone else? Beautiful. Wonderful. Anyone else? So good. Anyone else? Jesus, I give you my life. So good. Beautiful. I love it. I want to make sure I saw you. I see you, and I'm going to pray for you right now. Father, I thank you for the women and men who in this moment have opened up their lives to you. God, I'm just going to accept everything in their life to this moment as the backstory that's just leading up to the great story of their life. I pray, God, that right now they would know that their prayer has been heard, that you've opened up a future to them that they could not even imagine, that right now you would just wrap them up in your love and let them know they belong to you, that you will never leave them. And God, I just pray that today they would begin the new story of following Jesus, because your story is so much bigger than ours. And Jesus, I'm so grateful that we can't mess up our story so bad that you don't have a new chapter for us. We cannot make a mistake that you cannot create a beautiful, beautiful future from. And so all of us today, wherever we have found ourselves, whatever story we have told ourselves, just bring ourselves to you in all of our brokenness and all of our imperfection and all of our inadequacy and say, Jesus, would you take the material of me and tell a story so great that it would ring in eternity? We thank you, Jesus, and we pray in your name. Amen.
Pastor Erwin, thank you so much for that powerful message. If that talk resonated with you, if you heard something in your heart and it spoke to you, and you decided to cross that line of faith and give your life to Jesus, we'd love to hear from you. Please text DECIDED to 71711 and you'll hear back from us. We'll have a conversation about what it means to give your life to Jesus and what the next steps are. Ah, man, that was awesome. I hope you have the best day ever, and I can't wait to see you here next week.
I don't have enough words. I'll never live enough lifetimes to fully know your worth, to know all that you deserve. All of my deceptions, all of my duplicity. Now there is no record. You assume the best of me. And this is why I thank the Lord for saving me when I was weak. So I will sing. This is why I thank the Lord for everything. And this is why I thank the Lord. All of my affection, everything I have to give, the sum of my attention is measured in the praise I lift. So this is how I thank the Lord for saving me when I was weak. So I will sing. This is how I thank the Lord for everything. This is how I thank the Lord. And this is how I thank the Lord for loving me and keeping me. So I will sing. This is how I thank the Lord for everything. This is how I thank how I thank the Lord. This is how I thank the Lord. This is how I thank the Lord. This is how I thank